What's up, good people? It's Dr.SheCole here on the scene once again for another video. I wanted to take the time to always operate in the spirit of gratitude. So thank you to all of my new subscribers in the past 10 days. I appreciate you logging in, watching, and commenting. Specifically, there were a couple of people that I enjoyed having exchange in the comments in relationship to my video, Our Culture is Crumbling, the dialogue on Kendrick Lamar versus Drake and that whole beef. I wanted to thank specifically at Muscle by Mike 1382. Thank you so much. There's another individual that actually got into the comments as well that was very complimentary on my take of the whole rap beef. And I wanted to shout you out as well by name. I will look in my comments again and probably put something into this video while I'm talking about this because I wanted to acknowledge you as well. But thank you for everyone that's a new subscriber. Thank you for everyone that commented. And Muscle by Mike 1382 specifically asked for my opinion or wanting to see a video on Tupac. So I definitely wanted to take up that challenge, and I said I would go into the lab. I've done a little research and I have a little something for you now. This is going to be on the first 17 minutes of an interview that I was watching that Tupac Shakur did in 1988 while he was in high school, and he was a 17-year-old student. And I was just so impressed with him then, as I am still impressed with him now. And the title of this video will be The First 17 Minutes with Tupac Uncut. So before I get into that, I wanted to highlight that in the last video when I was discussing the Drake and Kendrick situation, I referred to Kendrick and a few other rappers as purists. And although I didn't give a list of more modern individuals, I wanted to confirm that I think that there are several ladies and gentlemen that would fit in that category as being purists. I believe one young lady's name is Rhapsody. And I forgot the other young lady's video that I saw in the last week where she really is reminiscent of a Public Enemy, Black Panther type of mystique. The imagery definitely there. And she was quite tight as well, but I would have to learn more about her lyrics and her artistry. But when I refer to a rap purist, I know that there is an art movement that is specific that took place after World War I, because the artists in that particular generation after the devastation of World War I wanted to bring simplicity back to art form. So I wanted to give a definition of purist and how I connect it to hip hop, rap, because that is an art form. But I wanted to give a definition from rooted in history, because we don't change history in this house. So purists attempted to reform France by simplifying their artwork. Purists' works included clean lines and lack of ornamentation, as well as a natural or primary colors that diverted from cubist abstraction, allowing viewers to see the work as a whole rather than individual aspects of that piece of art. This simplistic design allowed purists' work to transcend time. So I want to repeat that. This particular approach to the artwork allowed purists' work to transcend time because they lacked features that could be easily dated. And that is the piece of rap and hip hop that is key, because we can see right now that in the most recent rap beef that Tupac was transcending time and still very present and center stage as an example in this particular discussion and rap beef between Kendrick Lamar and Drake. Tupac still being used in literary spaces. I referenced A Rose from Concrete, one of the poems that he had written as a young man that is still utilized and in curriculum in classrooms today. His artistry and who he was as an artist transcended time. Therefore, in my mind, that is what categorizes Tupac and Kendrick and many others as purists, because it cannot be easily dated. The clean lines and lack of ornamentation also created order that was reminiscent of classical mathematical precision, which was important to the purists who thought it was a way of reaching transcendence, because we know that math is infinite. Purism consists of utopian ideals of uplifting people. That is key, because Kendrick is about the culture and uplifting people as a purist, and that is a part of the purist definition that came about shortly after World War I with a group of artists that were looking to reform France after the devastation of World War I. Purists who thought it was a way of reaching transcendence, purism consisted of utopian ideas of uplifting people by appealing to them on a spiritual level through purist artwork. The movement was intended to help restore and modernize France by appealing to people's unconscious appreciation for order, which purists exhibited through mathematical precision and balance. Now, again, focusing on reaching transcendence, utopian ideals of uplifting people while appealing to them on a spiritual level through purist artwork. The reason why the purist, by definition, a rap purist, is so important in the videos that I'll be discussing, which may turn into a series, is because I feel in the realm of education, in the realm of various industry and artistry, when you are a purist, you have an appreciation for some traditional truths. Again, the mathematics to reach a level of transcendence, being able to get into art form that cannot be easily tracked and or dated, so that it's not only relevant shortly after World War I in an era of reform after devastation, but also transcends time and is relevant and has impact well beyond the years of origin. Tupac is that influence. He is a purist because his work was spiritual. It did transcend because he was coming from a place that was rooted and grounded in knowledge, respect, and gaining more knowledge. Many things that he references in the video in 1988 when he references his mother and some of the things that were most valuable lessons that she taught him and his sister. So Tupac, for me, because he and I are in the same age group, I was graduating from high school in 1988, so 17 turning 18. He was 17 while doing this particular video. What was so beautiful about seeing Tupac in that very rare footage in his purest form as a teenager was how intellectually astute he was in that interview, and the reason he decided to and committed to doing the interview that we're still talking about now in 2024. Again, decisions he made in 1988 that transcended time because he was committed to his art form as an aspiring actor, wanting to do something that he felt was important, that had value, and that was discussing education and his perspective on education, which we will get into in part 2. But some of the things that he talked about in the first 17 minutes that I reviewed and analyzed was, and let me give respect and honor to the actual YouTube channel. You can find this video on Historic Films Stock Footage Archive, and I'll put the name below. And it's the Tupac Shakur high school interview in 1988, as I previously mentioned. So he's giving his views on being 17 as a learning stage. He's referring to that year of being the year of learning, and the year of turning 18 being where responsibility and respect come on you, although you may not want it, but the 17th year prepares you for that 18th year in a real way. Again, we're still dealing with mathematics and that transcending, which is something that Kendrick did mathematically in one of his songs. I believe it was the one that referenced 616, if I have the number correctly, but we'll get into it. So he mentions how he felt bad that he had to get permission from his mother to sign the release form in order to do the video because he was only 17, but he would have been able to make that decision for himself as an 18-year-old. But what was so brilliant in this particular interview on how he got to this particular interview date, and I remember watching this when this actually came out, he stated in the video very early on that he knows he's arrogant like his mom, and they were two peas in a pod in that way. And his mother served as a guide through his life, a teacher, more than just an authoritarian and a mother figure, but they were able to talk and have intellectual conversation and discourse as he went through that life using her as a guide. But when he said that he knew of his arrogance, and because he was taught to always speak in truth and no lies, he stated that he quit his job the day of this interview at a pizza place where he was working because he went in, followed the rules, asked to have the time off, assessed that they were fully staffed and it wouldn't be an inconvenience, and that he needed to really get to this interview because he is an actor and he felt like it was an important topic and work. His manager said no. And then the insult to injury, when coming in to ask if he would have permission to be granted the time off, he said, well, then I quit. The manager stated, no, you can't quit. So again, doing a review of the lay of the land that day, he was already suffering from a cold, which you could pick up on in the video. He had the sniffles, and they were going to assign him to work in the freezer. So in that Tupac way, he, during the rush in the pizzeria, you timed that masterfully, Tupac, spirit of Tupac. During the rush, he grabbed his leather jacket, lit a cigarette, smoked it, blew the smoke out, and walked out to come to the interview. Wow. That was amazing, riveting, inspirational. Some of us wish we could do that at our workplace today in 2024. Some of you may have the ability to do so. I don't know. But what bravery to make a bold move and statement like that from a student, then teenager, who confirms that his experience was galvanized through poverty. And one of the things he hated the most about being in that space is not being able to have the access to things that he really needed, and some of the things he wanted, but the things that he needed because of that poverty. And also connecting back to choice. His mother, who could have gone to college, elected not to because she wanted to explore life in another pathway so that she didn't have to buy into certain social norms, but knowing and understanding that the result of those decisions would not produce wealth, but it would anchor her children in knowing how to navigate life, having sound minds through the lessons of poverty and telling no lies and always standing in truth. Amazing, amazing to hear that out of the mouth of a 17-year-old. So when asked about additionally being 17 in this video, he says that the hardest thing about being 17-year-old in 1988 was proving to society that he knew and other youth like him knew and understood, which would have been me as well. We actually understood what was going on during that date and time. Also, the fact that he was socially aware without it being trendy or a fad of some point. And again, this comes into cultural appropriation. You're not saying you know anything about being impoverished, living in a certain community where there's particular social ills that you cannot avoid, but it is by virtue of where you live and your construct, and you are limited to, but not restricted from moving out in life if you have the mindset to transcend your circumstance. Again, purists in the art form wanting to transcend time as not to be dated is what Tupac lived, is what Kendrick Lamar lived, where you can have artistry birthed from your circumstance. And that's what gives it the spiritual power to transcend you even when you expire. When you attempt and successfully jump into cultural appropriations and build an empire, it will eventually crumble, no matter what the industry is. Hence why 𝐷𝐿𝐒 needs an apology out here, because he called it in January in relationship to the buckling of the empire when he was asked about Drake and some of these necessary truths and exposure that had been behind the scenes that are now coming out, characteristically with how this gentleman may have done business, how his views on certain women, in particular Black women, his treatment thereof. We won't get into the slime picture with Halle Berry and how she asked for that particular footage not to be utilized because it's embarrassing or was embarrassing for her, and his dismissal of that. Again, the negative commentary on our queen, Serena Williams. Like, you're touching too many iconic figures for me of women that have transcended space and time based on their artistry and their truths and did not culturally appropriate anything. And again, I have no issue with someone tapping into a marketplace, because this is a capitalistic society, building a brand, obtaining wealth. There's nothing wrong with that when it's done in a way that does not hurt, harm, injure, or maim, or disrespect others. But if you have gotten to your apex and that has been the ingredients of your path, then you do reap what comes with that. So Tupac also, when speaking about being socially aware without being trendy, states that in society, once you turn 18, as we know, you can vote. You can, at that point, be drafted when the draft was in effect. So you're ready to wage war and sign off on things as an adult and have a certain level of responsibility. And because his mother taught him to operate in truth, no lies, he stated that the world that in that time, 1988, that the teenagers of that day, and I was in that category, were inheriting was a horrible place to fix, and there was a lot of work to be done. And he referenced, Tupac referenced not being raised in any illusions, Disney, Santa Claus, etc. He was ready to deal with, although not wanting to, those social ills because it wasn't a trend for him. Also, knowing that adults of that day, and still to this day, don't give youth the fair shake they deserve and honoring their intellectual pathways because of fear. And everything in life, and I wish with some other things that are going on that I'm observing just myself personally and professionally, everything does not have to be analyzed to death. There are some things and some thoughts that just happen in our forms of expression that don't have to be picked apart to the carcass. Some of them are just thoughts and human exchanges. So everything is not meant to be analyzed, but it's amazing that footage from 1988 is being analyzed in 2024 and still is very relevant because it has transcended time. Additionally, as it relates to the growth, respect, knowledge, and the search for knowledge, as he was asked by the interviewer what were the tools and the top things that his mother taught him, it was respect, knowledge, and to search for knowledge, and it's an eternal journey. The brilliance that is Tupac, he said, you can see the line in my head and how it goes around, representing 360 degrees. He likened knowledge to that journey and referenced it like the line in his head that went 360 degrees. And I thought that just showed the master thinker and intellect that he was. And again, the reference to math and going back to being a purist and mathematics being something that can transcend time because it's infinite. And then the purists anchoring their philosophy of the purist movement in art so that art could transcend time. And of course, now Tupac stating that the tools that his mother taught him was the consistent search for knowledge, because knowledge is eternal, hence transcending time, all goes back to that math baseline, which I just think is entirely brilliant. The man was brilliant. So that's why there's no surprise to me that children that were not even alive when Tupac was thriving love Tupac and what he represents. I mean, I just think it's outstanding. And this is my messy moment. So when Jada Pinkett Smith was talking about he shaved his head in reference to, alopecia, I don't know what truth there is to that, but I just found it funny that with a full head of hair and a line that went 360 degrees around his head, that's what I thought of at that moment. But again, at 17, you might not have been dealing with an alopecia issue. I don't know if that's true or false. All things are alleged. The only things that have any type of truth that are research-based when I reference where I've gotten my sources from. So again, that just was a fleeting thought. Who knows? I guess if I had a connection with Tupac in high school, I would want to tap into that as much as possible, considering how iconic he was and is and continues to be. And also the reference to him and him knowing himself to be arrogant. In his arrogance, he also mentioned that his mother, like many mothers, have said, you were born with 2 ears and 1 mouth. So that means you always have to have an ear to hear, and then you can speak after obtaining understanding. And for me, always love how from biblical lessons, there is scripture that talks about, and all you're getting, get understanding. And it also talks about, the Bible also talks about study to show yourself approved unto God so you can rightly divide the word of truth, and how Tupac was raised that no lies should be told in the home. It's all truth, and having the ability in the relationship to sit and have a discourse with his mother about various things, rules, regulations. Do you feel that you should be punished for what you had done? Because the night before this interview, he had been out till 2:30 in the morning, and they had a discussion and a discourse, but she cultivated and curated that environment so that the intellectual growth and expanding of a divergent thinker such as Tupac could evolve and grow and be cultivated. So that type of a mind going into the construct of a public school education can be very threatening to those who are not acceptors of groupthink and thinking that everybody has to have the same thought, the same opinion, and anyone that shows something different somehow has to be silenced. And most people who are revolutionaries and most people who are about the movement and the culture are traditionally outliers in their field of choice. And it can seem threatening to those who are trying to establish and keep the status quo, which Tupac was none of those things. So we're going to get into more of his writing and his music specifically, but I wanted to reference his brilliance and his bravery in that 1988 interview. Again, this was the first 17 minutes of the analysis, 17 minutes in analysis of that video. Again, I want to reference, as I will again, the Historic Films Stock Footage Archive, Tupac Shakur, 1988 high school interview. Again, this is the first edition of the first 17 minutes of Tupac Uncut. This is Dr. 𝐓𝐿. Thank you so much for watching and have a wonderful rest of your day or evening. Bye-bye.